A nuclear Armageddon, also called a nuclear holocaust, is a theoretical scenario where nuclear detonation causes destruction and death so widespread that civilization collapses, humanity nears extinction, and Earth is no longer recognizable. Sound like something only from the movies? Not quite. Our planet came very close to a nuclear Armageddon a few decades ago, and the actions of one man alone prevented its occurrence and saved millions of lives. It was the 1980s. World War II had ended several decades earlier, but it was now the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension when distrust between nations was high. The two main opposing groups were the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. The Western Bloc was led by the United States and a number of First World nations. The Eastern Bloc was led by the Soviet Union and its Communist Party. There was no large-scale fighting between the two, but both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were engaged in an ideological and geopolitical struggle for world influence. On the alert for each other's actions, they were poised for full-scale conflict. Making matters far more complicated was the fact that the most dangerous weapons that the world would ever know, nuclear bombs, had become part of each nation's national defense. Stanislav Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Union's air defense forces during the Cold War and would unknowingly play its most important role. Petrov was born into a military family. During the First World War, his father had flown an aircraft fighter while his mother had been a nurse. It was only natural for young Petrov to follow in his father's footsteps. He graduated from the Kiev Military Aviation Engineering Academy of the Soviet Air Forces, one of the leading military university institutions that produces highly qualified engineers for the Soviet Air Forces and Soviet Air Defense Forces. After graduation, Petrov joined the Soviet Air Defense Forces, part of a well-trained team which served at one of the Soviet Union's early warning bases not far from Moscow. He was trained to monitor the new early warning system, a role he would hold for the entirety of his career. His main job? Looking for weapons launched by the United States. A series of steps were established for Petrov to follow in case there was an attack. Reporting missile warnings up the chain of command to top Soviet leadership, who would then decide on retaliation. There would be only one ultimate outcome: nuclear annihilation. In late September, Petrov would find himself in the middle of such a world-ending scenario. The day was September 26, 1983. Petrov was ending an overnight shift in the early morning hours when the computers sounded an alarm. The word launch in large red letters displayed on the screen. According to the system, an American intercontinental ballistic missile was headed towards the Soviet Union. Then, more missiles appeared on the screen. The system reported that a total of 5 had been launched. They were under attack from the United States. But were they really under attack? As the alarms continued to sound, Petrov stared at the screen. His training was rigorous, his instructions clear. He would have to report the attack to his superiors immediately. The outcome of that was clear, too. That month had been particularly tense between the two nations. Just several days prior, the Soviet Union shot down a Korean Airlines plane that had drifted into Soviet airspace, killing everyone on board. One of the passengers was a U.S. congressman. The episode led to an exchange of warnings and threats. So the warning of ballistic missiles could be entirely possible, and it would be within their airspace in 20 minutes. Petrov should have sent the report up the chain of command. It would mean a full-scale nuclear war. The Soviet Union would strike back before they would hit, precipitating a corresponding nuclear response from the United States. The Soviet Union had 35,804 nuclear warheads and could kill up to 180 million. The U.S. had 23,305 warheads and could kill up to 108 million people. It would be a nuclear Armageddon. That day, in the Soviet Warning System Command Center, other experts were present besides Petrov, but they were only support staff. The decision on what to do with the alert was entirely his. Petrov had to act fast. There was no rule about how long they were allowed to think, and every passing second was one closer to death. But something was not adding up. If it was an all-out nuclear assault, additional missiles be detected on the screen? Would the United States stop at just 5? If Petrov was wrong in his hunch, he would face execution. In the end, it was his civilian training that helped him decide. After several nerve-wracking minutes, he concluded it was a false alarm. As the 20-minute window closed before the supposed strike, he called the duty officer at the Army headquarters and reported a system malfunction instead. Petrov would be right. When 23 minutes had passed and there was no explosion, he and everyone else in the command center finally breathed a deep sigh of relief. An immediate investigation launched, revealing that the satellite warning system had indeed malfunctioned. It had mistaken the sun's reflection off the clouds for missile activity. Had another one of his colleagues with purely military training been on duty that day, the outcome would have been very different. The combined death toll would have been the most violent catastrophe in human history. Petrov underwent intense questioning, and although he was initially praised by the Soviet Union, he received no awards for his actions. He believed this was because the incident exposed a serious flaw in the early warning detection system, and public recognition for his actions would be an embarrassment for his superiors and the technicians responsible. Plus, if he had been officially rewarded, they would have had to be punished. The Soviet Union quietly moved past what is now known as the Soviet nuclear false alarm incident. The world went on, unaware that a meeting with death had been averted, and that Petrov had single-handedly saved the lives of hundreds of millions of people and their future generations. Today, we live to celebrate the decision Colonel Petrov made under immense pressure, for not giving in to the cloud of mistrust that was ever present, and using his better judgment in order to prevent a full-scale war and large-scale loss of life. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was a true hero.